chasing like moral consistency, I think the thing that interested me the most was that I saw that you supported some kind of a position that not just like captive bred animals, but also you think that animal rights um, should be consistent to wild animals as well. So you
Mm-hmm.
feel like people should advocate for wild animals like not eating each other, something like that. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I just take it to be the case that if there is a tiger that is eating a deer, I don't see that much different from a human and killing and eating that deer. So yeah, I don't see what's the difference. So I just hold the same view in both cases.
Um, I mean, are you familiar with the concept of like a moral agent,
Yeah, I am.
like the ability for this sentient creature to have like moral agency?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, well, don't have moral agency, right? Like they can understand the consequences of their perspective. I mean, morality is a human concept.
I'm actually not convinced of that.
Really? Okay. Can you
Yeah,
can
I
you
am agnostic
explain?
on
Like
that.
I'm open minded to hear differently.
Yeah, I don't have a positive view in the opposite direction. I'm not making the claim that they are moral agents, but I don't see a reason to believe that they are not moral agents. So I'm agnostic on that. And even
Okay,
if that
well,
was the
so
case, right?
my argument would be something along the lines of like they lack the capacity to reason.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I don't take that view.
So you think that a tiger, if it could live on plants, you think that it could reason that it is better to eat plants than other animals?
I don't know. I don't take a view on that. I'm agnostic.
Hmm. But um, you don't withhold the possibility that it could. Like you believe it's possible that a tiger could potentially reason its way to a vegan diet.
Yeah, at least it's logically possible. And I don't see any physical law being violated, so I think it's also physically possible.
I I think more than anything, your argument falls apart on the last statement that you made. It is not physically possible for cats to be like vegetarian. Um,
Oh, that's a different question than them being moral agents, right? You asked me if uh,
Absolutely, you're right. But you just said that you think that not only is it theoretically possible, but you think it's physically possible.
physically possible
And
for cats to be
it
able to
it
reason.
can't for cats. Well, hold on.
Yeah, those
So
are two
even if the
different
cat could
propositions, right?
reason, yeah, they are. You're right. But
Mm-hmm.
it's two different things. Like wow, we're getting deeper. So if the cat could reason and it could have moral agency,
Mm-hmm.
then, then it'd be in a real predicament, right? Because it physically can't survive on plants, but you believe it's possible that they could morally reason that they shouldn't eat animals.
Wait, can you come again?
Yeah. So I understand you're agnostic, but what you're suggesting is that like you believe it's possible that cats could reason, but that
Well,
they'd
there's
be in
a
a real
bit more
predicament
nuance
if
to
they
that.
could because they can reason that they shouldn't eat other animals, but physically they can't survive on plants. That becomes very tricky to navigate. Like
Not really. So again, I think there was a bit of clarity lost in the way you rephrased it. So I'll just clarify that. So what I take it to be that I don't see a reason why it's not possible. It just seems to me that there is no contradiction with physical laws or laws of logic or rules of inferences. That it is possible for cats to be able to reason into, yeah, basically reason into and reach the conclusion that they ought not eat other animals. So I don't see a contradiction with that proposition. So it gives me reason to believe that it's logically possible. But again, I'm not going to take a strong view on whether it is actually possible or not, because there could just be a contradiction that I'm not aware of. And if someone could point it out to me, I would change my view. But
well, cats are
currently,
obligated.
mm-hmm. were you saying something?
I said cats are obligate carnivores.
Yeah, that just means that they have certain nutrition requirements which aren't exclusively found in plants.
No, it's the opposite. It means they are exclusively found in
Yeah, I
animal
mean, but
products.
if you just reduce that, what does it mean to be an obligate carnivore?
It means that you can't get all the nutrients you need from plants.
Yeah, isn't that just what I said? I just said that there are
It means that
nutrients
they're
which
not
you couldn't get
exclusively
it from
found.
plants, right? That's what I said.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but again, so if
So
you
let's go
could
through the thought
supplement
experiment
them,
then.
if you could supplement the
Let's say
diet
that
with
cats. Let's say that.
synthetic supplements, yeah, I think it's possible for a cat to be vegan.
Okay. So let's go through the thought experiment. If cats were perfectly capable of reasoning, but they didn't have the ability to obtain supplements, like right, they're not making these supplements. Then what would be their moral obligation? To kill themselves.
Uh it depends on their values. If they share the same if I was that cat, yeah, I would do that.
Really? So do you hold the moral position that we should kill all predators?
Not necessarily all of them, but yeah, I'm sure there is some threshold up until which I would be fine with killing predators or other predators to be specific.
That seems extreme, man. And also, I think that there's like a biological breakdown as well. Are you familiar with like the balance of an ecosystem? How like predator keep prey populations down, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I am aware of that. But yeah, it's just going to be there. There's just going to be some threshold because it's not going to be one. Let's say if you're talking about lions, it's not going to be just the death of one lion which is going to cause an ecological collapse. There is going to be some threshold up until which if you cross the amount of lions to be killed, that if you cross that threshold is going to cause an ecological collapse. But until that threshold, I don't see a problem,
I
and
think
I don't know where the threshold is.
necessarily your position holds some kind of a contradiction. Like you're okay with the removal of predators if they're unwilling to reason themselves into a vegetarian diet. But you don't see like how that like creates like a fantastical world. Like there's no way for there's no way for our ecosystem to balance itself without predators.
Well, I'm not actually convinced of that.
Okay, so
They,
without
but
predators,
wait,
the
one sec. So
maintaining
you said there was some
so what you're
contradiction, right?
hold on 1 second, man. What you're suggesting is that without predators, well, actually, what are you suggesting? Without predators, how would herbivores manage their population levels?
Well, I don't have to take a view. I don't have to make a positive claim on that. You asked me if it was. Yeah, I don't have to take a positive view on that.
Sounds like you don't have like a real good understanding of like how biology works in like concert with each other.
No,
Like
I have
predator-prey
I have a
balances, like
pretty I have a
if
pretty
you have
decent
too many
understanding.
herbivores on an area, like are you familiar with the concept of like carry capacity for an area?
Yeah.
Like there's only so many plants that can grow in a certain area for like a herbivore to eat, right? And once they eat all of that, then what they starve off.
I'm not convinced. I mean, there is no empirical evidence to suggest that.
There is a lot of it, man. There's whole fields of science that go into like understand. Like this is why there's a whole concept right now of like what to do with invasive species once they come on to different environments. Like island environments are a perfect example. When you get like hogs or goats on an island environment where there's no natural predators to keep their population levels down, then they just go around eating all the native plants to the point of like extirpation.
Yeah, so that's just I mean, you're going to have to make the case that that is somehow worse than letting predators run amok.
I mean, I think you could make a reasonable argument that like for life to exist at all, there has to be a balance. Like let's say theoretically that I'm right, and that if you removed a keystone creature from the environment, all of the biology would collapse.
Well, again, it would just be so. My view would be until a particular threshold, right? So
Yeah, I'm not sure
if
what you're
that,
saying, because I don't think I think that that's a cop out. Because what I'm suggesting is
I'm
that,
not
like,
sure what you mean by
okay,
that.
well, okay, tell you what, because it'd be difficult for me to prove this, but let's go ahead and use this as like as a thought experiment. So let's assume I'm right, that if you remove a key predator, like even just one species, like a lion or a great white shark or some kind of like apex predator, the rest of our biology would collapse. All right. So I agree that it's possible that if you remove just one, it might not be the case. But let's suggest that it would. In your worldview, would that be more moral than allowing that apex predator to continue to consume other animals?
But you're like removing all of them, right?
Yes.
Let's say, okay, so the question you're asking me is if we just removed all of them, is that better than letting them live?
Then all of biology collapsing, or all of our environment collapsing. Yeah.
I'm not sure. It would depend on the utility. So if there is some kind of utility drain which is higher than the rights violations which is entailed,
Are you
then
an
yeah.
anti-natalist? Are you an anti-natalist?
No, I'm not.
Because that is kind of like the argument that you're making, though. Because like you'd be okay with environmental collapse, provided it made some kind of a moral argument that was beyond the death of prey animals. Is that right?
Not necessarily. I said if there was, like, if removing that one predator entailed some high level of disutility, then I wouldn't be in favor of it. But if that wasn't the case, then I would, yeah, then I would be in favor of it.
Okay. Are you familiar with like moral relativism versus like moral absolutism? Like, where do you stand on that?
Oh, well, on my metaethics, in my personal usage of moral language, I'm a subjectivist. But when it comes to public usage, I'm agnostic.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, okay. So hold on. On your public usage, can you like get into that further? Because I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, so I just take moral realism to be a conjunction of three propositions. One is cognitivism, the second one is rejection of error theory, and the third one is non-objectivism. Wait, yeah, moral objectivism. I reject the third one. I accept the first two propositions, which is cognitivism and rejection of error theory.
Yeah. Okay. So but you're getting into like you're getting into a different category of like of labeling. So my question has to do more with like relativism versus absolutism.
Yeah, relativism.
So here's a perfect.
Can you tell me what's the proposition that's entailed by absolutism?
Yeah. Like a wrong is always a wrong versus like it being held in the context of the time that it occurred. Like the perfect example is slavery. Like I think from an absolutist standpoint, slavery was always wrong, right? But also when you're so, I think
I don't know what you mean by wrong. If like if it's going to be a meta-ethical thing, you would have to clarify the terminology. When you say wrong, what do you mean by that?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
When I say wrong, I mean it's a moral wrong.
yeah, like what do you mean by a moral wrong?
I think it violates my standard of moral ethic.
Okay, so something like you have a preference against it?
Yeah.
Okay.
so I think that moral relativism is wishy-washy, but I also think that like when you're comparing morality, like especially acts that you're evaluating, it is important to bring in context. So like, the framers of our country, for example, all owned slaves, but at the time that was a common practice. So like, are they horrible people because they owned slaves, or was that a moral wrong that they committed within a context of a time period where that was a common thing? So I mean, I'm when you said earlier that you tend to be subjective, okay, I accept that. But
I'm not sure what you
you
mean
used
by
the
tend
term,
to be
you used the term
subjective.
utilitarian earlier, and I think that I tend to lean that direction as well, which makes it really tough for me to understand where you're coming from with this perspective that like we should hold wild animals to the same moral ethic that we hold ourselves to. It's really strange.
Okay. I mean, firstly, I need to get clarity on. So when you say founders of USA were like horrible people or whatever for owning slaves, what do you mean by horrible
That's not
people?
that's not what I said. No, I said that what they did was wrong, but in the context of the time period, it was a common thing. So that's why I'm saying like
Oh, sorry about that.
moral relative to the time period. That's not so bad. It's still bad though, from an absolutist standpoint. The reason I'm asking these questions, I'm trying to understand your moral framework a little better because I'm trying to understand if you really believe these things or if you're just going down this path to support it to try to maintain logical consistency. Because that's my guess.
Well, I'm not sure what you. Okay, so are you asking me if.
You can't really expect to hold animals accountable for eating other animals.
Why
That
not?
seems that's that seems disingenuous.
I mean, you would have to substantiate that.
It's a feeling. How do I substantiate
Oh,
what I
okay.
feel?
Oh, you're saying it's. Yeah, I mean, I can't do much about it. I can't change your feelings, right?
I'm not expecting you to. Just
Yeah.
like I said, surprise.
But yeah,
All right.
when you ask, so you asked me if I was like, so I actually don't understand the distinction between absolutism and relativism, depending on what you gave me. But if you're going to ask me if owning slaves in the era of slavery was a bad thing, yeah, then I would say it was a bad thing.
Yeah. No, that was an example of like how to determine relativism versus absolutism.
Okay, yeah.
That's easy. Okay. So one of the questions I like to ask vegans because it is like it kind of defines the question that I just had is at what point do you think we became morally superior to our ancestors?
At what point do we? What do you mean by morally superior?
You, being vegan has an implicit implication that you believe you're morally superior to your ancestors because all of your ancestors ate meat. For
Not.
tens of thousands of years, all human beings ate meat, and then just in like the last little blip of existence, we a certain percentage of us have come to the belief that they are morally superior to everyone that came before them.
Yeah, it's just going to cash out in terms of my values, right? So if my ancestors did something that's contrary to my values, yeah, of course I'm going to be I would say that we are morally superior to them. Yeah.
Interesting. All of them. Have you really stopped to consider like what that position implies?
I'm
I
not
saw
sure.
something the other day that like for you to be alive, you have something like 5,000 relatives just back. I forget what it was. It was something like 10 generations or something like that. It's not like a fantastic amount of time, right? You've got 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, 16. Back. That's so many people that you think were like bad moral agents.
Yeah.
These are people that you theoretically care about.
Well, it depends. If they are too far off, I don't really care about them. If they are in like the last 3 or 4 generations, then I would care about them.
I don't know. If you got to be in a room with your great 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 grandparents, that'd be pretty cool, right? And like, yeah, you don't know them, but it'd be really cool to meet them. And I think
Would be cool,
most
but I'm not sure that
most people.
that wouldn't change my judgment. Would be
Did you?
cool.
I
I
mean,
grant that.
hold
Yeah.
on, wait a minute, hold on. That's interesting because I assume like you get some of your perspective from your parents, right?
Uh some probably.
Yeah, at least some.
At least
It's
something.
like
Sure, I can
it's
grant
basic
that.
like nature versus nurture concept. Like, yeah, you are the person you are going to be no matter what, but that's influenced highly by like your friends and family.
Can you come again? I couldn't hear you.
Describing the nature versus nurture concept. So like we are all the people we are going to be to a certain extent, but our who we are is highly influenced by our immediate people,
Oh yeah,
our family.
I'm agnostic on that. I'm agnostic on how much influence nature or what versus nurture has. I'm sure there's a bit of both, but yeah.
You don't think that you're influenced by the people that you surround yourself with?
I'm sure I am, but not to a great degree. Maybe to some degree, but I'm not sure to what extent.
Interesting. Interesting. I think I think that we are highly impacted by the people we surround ourselves with. And I think that impact is greater than a lot of people care to admit. Because oftentimes you'll surround yourself with people that are amusing in the moment, but like if you evaluate your friends for what they mean to you long term,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this is a common reason why as you get older, your friend circle gets closer, like it's smaller,
Hmm.
right? Because you get what you start to understand and you look further in. Like as you get older, you start to live less in the moment, and um, you start to look further into the future. That happens especially when you have kids. I mean, your perspective and your priorities start to change. You start to think about what you're building for them for their future.
Hmm.
I guess the point that I was getting at is I think your family impacts you quite a bit. And if you had the ability to be in
Yeah,
the
I mean,
room
I
with
don't
your
deny
great
that.
great
I'm
great
sure there is some
grandparents,
impact.
I mean, yeah, you might not know them and you might not take everything they have to say as gospel, but at the same time, like, it would be impactful. I'd love to meet my great great grandfathers. That would have been amazing. I mean, I don't know if they would have abruptly changed my worldview, but I think that perspective would have been fun to get.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I
You
don't
know,
deny that it would be cool.
I don't know. I think one of the things that I see from vegans is like an anti-human sentiment and like a rejection of family quite a bit as well. Like I've had vegans in the past when I asked that question say like, I don't give a fuck about my family or whoever these people were because they ate me. And it's like, man, I don't really know if you believe that or you're just trying to maintain moral consistency because you believe veganism is so superior to, every other lifestyle. And so when I when I hear people like, swear off every like prior generation of their family, I don't know. I kind of like raise my eyebrows at it. I have a hard time believing that they actually feel that
Hmm.
way. In the same way that like, I have a hard time. I don't know how close you are to your family, but I have a hard time believing that like if you were in the room with your great great grandparents, like you would like what they have to say would have zero impact on you. You have to have some.
I mean, it depends on what they say.
Really, it really wouldn't matter what my great great grandparents said. Whether I accepted it or not, that's a different thing. But like, it would have an impact on me.
Oh, well, I'm not sure what you mean by an impact. If like, yeah, if it's not in terms of like changing your view or something.
Mm.
Would it like cause like I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean that you would feel excited or something like that?
Well, anytime you gain a perspective that's different from your own, I think that you have a better ability to sympathize with something that you don't understand.
I have no idea what that means.
Really? Like, let's say that you saw like somebody wearing clothing that just looked ridiculous to you, But you had no understanding of the context of like how people wear it or why they wear it. And then all of a sudden you were forced to spend like either an enormous amount of time around that type of culture, or you know, you were forced to do some kind of like a history report in school. You don't think that clothing would seem less ridiculous to you if you had like a better perspective of that culture?
It depends. Yeah, it could. I mean, I could get used to it, sure, if that's what you mean.
The reason I'm asking these things is because one of the things that I see from like the vegan community that is very vocal and activist, like that are activists, is like they tend to reject things abruptly that they have no experience or perspective around. Hunting seems to be like the main thing, and the irony, of course, is that like hunters kill far less animals than like the meat processing industry, right? So by gaining some perspective talking to a hunter, I'm hoping that you have like a little bit more sympathy and understanding for like perhaps why people hunt, and maybe they're not like the great villains that like most vegans believe hunters to be.
Well, if you ask me if hunters are doing something bad, then yeah, I would still say that they are doing something bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to like change your mind on whether or not hunting is bad. It's more like the idea of like gaining perspective, right? So most vegans that I meet, like they come from crowded city environments. They have very little exposure to wildlife, and their worldview is shaped by like a really poor understanding of how people live close to the land.
Okay, what about it?
Would you agree? Is that like a pretty fair assessment of most of the vegans that you know?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Sure you do, or you don't want to admit it. Like, do most vegans you know live in like big cities? Do you know
No,
any vegans that like?
I come from a third world country, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you live in a rural environment or in like a city center?
I live in a rural, I mean, right now I'm in a rural environment, but I used to live in a suburban environment.
Okay. I've been asking all the questions. So you got anything for me?
Yeah, so probably I just want to run name the trade, right? So I would ask you, um, so just like a preliminary question, if someone were
I'm familiar. I'm familiar with the line of questioning. I
okay,
think for me, the trait is it's really like a combination of traits
okay,
that have to do with the conscious experience of an animal. So in the past, I've mentioned something like theory of mind or episodic memory, something like that.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, I think from a consistency standpoint, it probably holds true. Like, I don't like that's probably where I frame my moral perspective is like, or my moral consideration rather would be on what I believe the sentient creature to have as far as a conscious experience, because I perceive sentience and consciousness as two different things. I think sentience is kind of like a light switch. Either a living creature is or isn't aware, and I think awareness is probably a pretty good placeholder for sentience. Whereas like consciousness has a lot to do with like how they experience the world and like emotions and awareness and understanding of consequence and all that kind of stuff. So most animals live like in the moment in a very like episodic memory type of loop. Whereas there are some animals that have, procedural memory rather. Most animals live in like a procedural memory type of um, in the moment loop. Whereas some animals, like humans, elephants, we have episodic memory. So like we can remember visually like past events, and that kind of gives us the ability to like reason um, and perhaps suffer in a worse way. If you can remember like a traumatic event as it happened, I think that's like a level of suffering, and I doubt that like I'll ever find any desire to hunt like an elephant or an ape, anything like that that has that kind of memory.
Okay, so one of the traits was procedural memory.
Episodic memory.
Episodic memory is for humans, right?
Humans and elephants and like
Yeah, so
apes.
like I think that would
And
be
the other one would be the other trait. I mean, it's really it's like a group of traits, but the other trait would be something like theory of mind.
theory of mind. Okay, theory of mind. Okay, okay, cool. So
Is this new?
so these are actually traits that humans possess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the question I was going to ask is what is the proposition that is true of the animal that, if true of the humans, would make it okay to kill them? So
I'm
you
sorry.
gave
Can
me
you rephrase?
propositions which are true of the humans. I asked you, I would ask you for the propositions that are true of the animal.
If the animal possessed those traits like an elephant does,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it's moral to kill those animals.
No. But see, I was going to ask you something like, what's the proposition that is true of the animal that, if true of the humans, would say it's okay to kill the human?
No, I don't know that I have one.
Oh, so there is not the case that there a single proposition that is true of the animal that, if true of the human, would make you say it's okay to kill them?
Yeah.
Oh, so that would commit you to a view like, so yeah, so that would actually lead to a contradiction.
Okay. Share it with me.
Yeah, so basically the idea is that you have two possible worlds in which, in the first possible world, the creature is an animal. In the last possible world, in the last possible world, the creature is a human of the kind that you value, and there are a bunch of intermediate worlds. Now, the question I asked you just is, at what point in this trait equalization process, which is just that we are taking propositions that are true of the animal and we are making them true of the other human. So we are shifting the scale from maybe right to left. So I'm asking you, at what point in the trait equalization process moral value would be lost to such an extent that you would deem it okay to kill that particular creature. So if you say
I
there
got
is
you.
no point in the trait
No, there
equalization
is.
process.
No, I'm sorry. There is. So like right. So right. So at the point at which a human being like loses, that conscious experience. I mean, I think to a certain extent we already do treat those human beings differently, right? It's very difficult to like legally change these kinds of treatments, but we do in some cases. Like if somebody's like severely mentally affected, we could restrict their rights. We restrict their right to carry a firearm in the U.S. The court might issue them like a.
Yeah, but the question is, at what point does it make it okay to kill them and eat them?
More, yeah, so I mean, at some point, like in a vegetated state, we do assisted suicide in some states. We allow the what's the word I'm looking for? Like when you have authority over your like aging relatives to like potentially pull the plug if they're on life support, that type of thing. I think that's along the lines of the question you're asking. Has a little bit to do with mental cognition, but I think we assign personhood to every living person, and we only restrict their rights legally in rare cases. And I think from a moral perspective, it's really tough to judge. But yeah, I mean, I think we already do kind of provide rights for, restrict rights for people who are like mentally handicapped.
Yeah, I mean, I can grant that we restrict rights, but my question was, at what point is it okay to kill them?
I mean, in a vegetated state.
Okay, so a vegetative state, as in when they're not sentient?
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, so you would need to expand on what you mean by vegetative state.
Yeah, I'm not really sure at what point we get to that level. I think It's kind of difficult to define.
Yeah, I mean that would also be a problem, right? So if you're going to be like vegetative state, that could have many
If you're
construals.
asking me to like bite, if you're asking me to like bite the bullet and suggest that like human beings that are born with like limited cognition to the point of an animal, if I'm okay with them being uh, killed or terminated, sure.
Oh, so if there was like some human who had the same, maybe I could add in the things that you mentioned before, right? So if there was a human who
Sure.
lacked theory of mind and
It could be really tough to measure those things. So I don't know if you could like, if you could present legislation to like
yeah, I
quantify
know
that.
we
But
could,
if you're
but just in
like
principle, right?
maintain moral consistency, I think sure. I think I think people that are like doomed to suffer a life of like semi-conscious imprisonment in a body that's being held by life support. Sure, I'm
Oh,
okay with
not
fighting.
necessarily life support, right? So I'm asking you about like there is this person, right? This person has all the traits that are true of the kind of human that you value, with the exception of having episodic memory and lacking a theory of mind. So if there was such a person, you would say it's
Yeah,
okay
I
to
mean
kill that person?
yeah. So that's like a theoretical, which are obviously kind of hard to answer. But sure, I guess in that case, yes, I'm willing to bite the bullet there.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I get, yeah, that's all I wanted to get out.
Okay. Is that like is that like the crux of like how you try to like debate moral consistency? Is name the trait, or is there other areas where you try to like corner omnivores, meat eaters into like moral inconsistencies?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The kind of omnivores that I have encountered, they generally don't bite that bullet, and so it's either them not biting the bullet and then running into a contradiction, or they would just dodge the question and try to wiggle out of
Yeah.
it. Um, but yeah, so I
All
don't,
right.
yeah, so that's the, yeah, the other thing I could
So,
do, right, is to push them on the particular trait that they mentioned. Like for instance, you mentioned animals lack a theory of mind, so I would push you on what's the argument that they lack a theory of mind, and what's the argument that they
yeah.
lack
No,
episodic memory.
um. So I think um. Yeah, that's a fair question. I think it has more to do with like what it indicates, like what level of reasoning it indicates,
Mm-hmm.
like a conscious creature has. Theory of mind allows you to like see yourself as somebody else sees you. So it's like the ability to like empathize with how somebody else is interpreting your existence, and I think that level of like cognition allows you like perhaps the ability to suffer. When you consider like, for example, like if I think about in the event that like I'm die or I'm murdered at a like young age, like how that would affect my kids. That's obviously like an exercise that human beings can go through that obviously animals can't. So like when
Yeah, I'm
vegans
asking you
create
an
these little
argument
posts
for
that are
that.
like so when vegans create these little posts like the mother or father deer was brutally killed in front of its children. It's like animal families don't exactly work that way. Like that fawn is not going to think about like its mother or its father at all outside of like whatever utilitarian purpose that older deer, that more mature deer had for that fawn, like showing it where certain areas are. So like during the hunting that we run hunting seasons for deer in the fall, and the spring is when the fawns are born. By the time fall rolls around, um, they're almost completely capable of supporting themselves on their own, right? So, if you shoot a doe and there's a less than 1 year old fawn, that fawn will exist until the next year. And so these little narratives that vegans create where it's like, oh, how could you do that right in front of its siblings, its brothers, its sisters? It's like they don't really suffer like that, right? They don't think about like, that
Yeah,
other
I'm
animals'
asking you
pain.
for an argument for that claim. You're just repeating the claim.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I asked you to substantiate the claim. You instead just repeating the claim.
Substantiate what claim? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you ask the question.
Yeah, so the claim is that they don't suffer that way, or they don't have episodic memory, or they don't have theory
Because
of
they lack
mind,
the
right?
yeah, they lack the ability to. Oh, are you asking me to prove that they don't have that?
Yeah, I'm asking you for an argument that they don't have it.
Yeah, so there's a neurologist, Juan Carlos Marvizone. I'll link some stuff to you after our debate, but he's wrote some really cool arguments, or really cool articles rather, on where within the human mind those functions are actually where they exist, where like geographically inside the brain, like what physical sections of the brain you have to have to be capable of that kind of thought and understanding, right? We now understand like where these types of thoughts and emotions are generated within the brain. And in most animal brains, they don't even have like those physical attributes to be able to be capable of that kind of high conscious thought. So so that's
Like
how we
what?
know like theory of mind,
No, no, no.
like
I
even
mean, like,
specific
what
emotions.
structures do they lack?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm asking you what structures are you saying that they lack, which is
Oh, I'm
possessed
sorry.
by?
I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a neurologist. I don't know like what those structures are. But I'll link to you after the after our discussion the article, and you can kind of go through it. He lists a bunch of them. He used to have it on a website called Speaking of Research. But he's got it on his own website now, and there's some other articles as well. He's if you want to look him up, he's a neurologist at UCLA.
Okay,
And
so
there's
right now you
there's
don't
other
have an
people.
argument, right?
I'm sorry.
So right now you don't have an argument for those claims, right?
I don't have an argument. You mean supporting evidence for those claims?
Yeah, like an inference to that proposition.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're suggesting. Are you saying that you don't believe that that information exists, like that research exists? Is that what you're saying?
No, like an argument with premises that lead to the conclusion that theory of mind and episodic memory are not possessed by animals.
They lack the physical structure inside their brain to be capable of those. So therefore, my argument is that they don't have it.
Okay, so if they lack the physical structures that are necessary for a particular for theory of mind or episodic memory, then they lack episodic memory and theory of mind. Is that the first premise?
Yes.
Okay.
In the same way that you would say, like, if a living creature lacks like a central nervous system, they're incapable of experiencing pain. In the same way that creatures with a central nervous system are capable of experiencing pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm
Okay.
just gonna cast doubt on the second premise, which is going to be whether those structures are necessary for that particular for those things to exist.
I'm sorry again. I'm having a hard time following you. It's the regional accent. It's a me
Oh,
thing, not a you
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Just repeat
Sorry
yourself.
about that. So I'm asking you. So I'm just going to cast doubt on the second premise, which is that they lack the necessary structures in their brain, right? So I'm going to cast doubt on whether those structures are actually necessary for these theory of mind and episodic memory, or is there like a
So what you're doing is you're disputing it though without any kind of support for why you dispute it. You just think that this neurologist perhaps is wrong.
yeah, I don't think that I'm not convinced by that proposition. So yeah, I don't need to, like, the
Well,
burden
okay,
is on them.
so let me ask, let me frame this differently. Would you also, okay, so if I were to suggest that, like, actually, I don't think animals feel pain, even though they have a central nervous system, I don't think they feel pain. Would you think that that would be like a compelling argument?
It wouldn't be a compelling argument for what?
Right. In the same way that you suggesting that even though they lack the physical structures for them to be capable of this kind of thought, you don't believe that you believe that they're still capable of that thought. that's not a compelling
Oh no,
position.
that's not my view. I'm just disputing the claim that they are incapable. So I don't have to take the positive view that they
You
are
just said
capable.
you just said the same thing two different ways.
No, not necessarily. So I could take the view that they are capable, or I could not take the view that they are capable. I could be agnostic on this whole thing, but the burden is on the claimant. So if the claimant is claiming that these structures are necessary, they would have to
Okay.
provide an argument for that.
So I would have to provide an argument for why that physical infrastructure in the brain is necessary for that cognition.
Yep.
That's like an appeal to authority, though. What I'm suggesting is that
Wait, how is that an appeal to authority? I'm not appealing to any authority.
Okay, so all right.
Wait, can you first withdraw that it was an appeal to authority?
It is, though, because what you're suggesting is that
Okay, what's the authority that I'm appealing to?
well, you're suggesting that my research is invalid because
That's not what I'm suggesting.
all right, I made the argument that a neurologist has released research that suggests that animals don't have physical componentry in their brain that is necessary for certain cognition, and you're suggesting that you don't believe that, and I'm not sure exactly why you don't believe that.
Wait, so first you said it's an appeal to authority, right? So I'm asking you what's the authority that you think I'm appealing to?
Okay, fine. I'll withdraw that claim.
Cool. I
Acknowledge that
appreciate that.
you're simply disputing. Acknowledge that you're simply disputing. You're disputing an argument without any kind of support for the dispute.
Well, I don't.
You're casting.
Yeah,
casting
I'm
doubt.
just agnostic on that particular proposition. So it would have to be
Man, you
substantiated.
put us in a circle here, though, because what you're saying is okay, you're making an argument with supporting evidence, but I just don't believe it. That's kind of what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that. So you have a study that says it's that animals lack the necessary brain structures for a particular thing, right? I'm disputing that. I'm just agnostic on whether those structures are necessary to begin with.
I'm sorry. You're disputing why they're necessary to begin with.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that those structures are necessary for those features to be true.
And what I'm saying is if I were to suggest that I'm not convinced that a central nervous system is necessary for a creature to feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you just roll your eyes like that? That's a ridiculous position to have. What evidence do you have to support the fact? What evidence do you have to support the fact that central nervous system is or isn't necessary to experience pain?
Well, you're trying to get me to make some sort of a positive claim, right? So, but I'm just asking you to substantiate your claim. I haven't made a claim here.
You're disputing research that you haven't even read, though.
Yeah, I get the drift that there are some structures which are present in humans but are absent in animals. I just don't think that entails that animals lack the features.
Wait, hold on. You're arguing that they don't. You're arguing that they lack or don't lack the structures.
No, I'm saying that even
that are necessary for that cognition.
Yeah, I'm saying that.
And I think that you're honestly. I think that you're just you're begging question is what you're doing. It's like.
Wait. So.
I don't actually.
Dude, okay. So you're saying I'm begging the question, right? So what's the premise that I'm assuming in the? What's the proposition I'm assuming in the premises, and what's the conclusion of the argument? I'm not even making an argument, actually. So I don't know what you're talking about when you're saying begging the question.
Okay, so basically you're just disputing my argument without any kind of support for the dispute. Are you suggesting that you're not convinced because you haven't seen it?
Not necessarily.
You just got done saying a second. You just got done saying a second ago that you understand the concept that animals' brains don't necessarily have the same structures that our brains have and those structures may or may not be necessary for certain cognition, correct?
May or may not be. Yeah.
Okay. So what are you actually disputing? That the structures are necessary for cognition?
Yeah, that's what I'm disputing.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay. So that's just kind of like an ignorant position then. Because,
Yeah,
I
it's an
mean,
agnostic view. I'm not, I don't see how that entails that they don't have that cognition.
so it'd be the same thing as me saying, like, I don't actually think that animals feel pain because I'm not convinced that a central nervous system is necessary to feel pain.
You could say that. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from saying that, but it's going to commit you to some other things.
It basically is like the same kind of ignorance that you're espousing.
Yeah, I mean, saying that a central nervous system is not necessary for pain. Wait, that's a different claim. So that's not even analogous.
Um,
The
in your perfect world,
you're saying that, wait, one sec. So you're saying that I said that there is a particular structure, and I'm not convinced that that particular structure is necessary for cognition, and you're
yeah.
saying
So
that.
it'd be like you saying like I give any animal with a central nervous system moral consideration because I believe that those animals with a central nervous system can feel pain, and it'd be like me saying, nah, I don't think a central nervous system is the indicator that animals can feel pain. Something along those lines.
Oh yeah, I mean that's just going to commit you to a view like it's okay to electrocute humans, uh, because yeah, having a central nervous system is not indicative of someone having pain, even though that person is visibly in pain.
All right, man. I think we split that hair sufficiently. So, just out of curiosity, in your like perfect fantastical world where animals have some level of like basic rights, how would we go about like any basic human development?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Right. So I assume that in your world, like all animals would be given the right not to be killed, correct?
No.
No?
Yeah, no. That wouldn't follow on my view.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Man, this is a regional dialect thing. So are you saying that you believe animals should not be killed?
It depends on the animal.
Oh, right. Sorry. You believe that predators should be killed, right?
Well, it's a different view. So I would say that it's okay to kill predators as long as the disutility is not outweighed. Yeah, that's the view.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's a difference between saying that they should be killed and saying that it would be okay if we kill them.
Got it. Do you believe like bugs should be killed?
Should be killed? I'm not sure. But I mean, well, it depends on the context. Like in a vacuum, no, of course not.
Okay. So do you think it's okay for us to kill bugs to like build houses?
Uh, Bugs to kill houses. Yeah, it would depend on the context. Like, are these bugs eating uh, other insects
Nope.
alive?
These bugs are perfect moral creatures that don't kill any other bugs.
Yeah, then there's a few things, right? So, is there sufficient evidence to believe that these bugs are sentient? Bugs to kill houses. Yeah, it would depend on the context. Like, are these bugs eating other? Looks like the stream ended abruptly.
Hey man, we got cut off at the hour mark. You can go ahead and join.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I was just saying that there's a few things. Yeah, so there would have to be some reason to believe that these bugs are sentient. These bugs would have to not be killing each other and eating each others. Um, they like
All
yeah.
right. Well, let's remove all the doubt. Let's take an animal that you believe is sentient and a perfect moral creature. Perhaps like a mouse, a rabbit, something like that.
Okay, yeah, we can go with maybe a rabbit.
All
Yeah.
right. Do you think that the fact that these creatures are killed while we drive vehicles would do you think that their basic animal right would prevent us from driving vehicles?
I don't see how.
Because it's like a statistical certainty that we're going to kill these things.
Statistical certainty?
Hey man, we got cut off at the hour mark. You can go ahead and join again. That these creatures are killed while we drive vehicles. Shoot, you dropped off.
Yeah, so you were saying it was a statistical certainty?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean the probability of running over a rabbit is 100%?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
I
you're
should
kidding.
say is a probability 1 because probabilities are from 0 to 1. But yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
I
saying?
think that. So well, okay. I was trying to avoid like going into like the farming aspect of it, but I think that's more of a that's more of a like a better analogous argument. So should we be able to use like pesticides to grow our food?
But wait, we were talking about statistical
It was a bad analogy.
okay,
It was
cool.
a bad analogy. So let's move on. So should we be able to use pesticides to grow our food?
I don't see a reason why not.
Because it absolutely kills sentient creatures.
And I don't see how that entails we should not.
We should. So you're comfortable with us killing sentient creatures?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you speciesist?
Depends on what you mean by speciesist.
I mean, do you just have preferences over which animals we kill to feed ourselves?
Oh, well, my view on crop deaths is not necessarily species. Well, you could say it's somewhat species motivated, but it's not a species exclusive view. It's the propositions that are true of these particular species that makes it okay in my view.
I don't even know what that means. Is it if it were the case that it was that less sentient life was killed hunting versus commercial farming, would hunting not be more vegan than farming?
Not necessarily.
Explain.
Yeah, so my view would just be some kind of a hybrid view between deontology and consequentialism. So I would just take it to be the case that I would prefer worlds where there are less rights violations relative to a world where there are more rights violations, and I would prefer a world where there is more utility as compared to a world where there is less utility, and vice versa for suffering. So the point just is that if you're making the case that it's bad, like if you're like running some sort of an internal critique that crop deaths are justified are unjustified on our view, then I don't see how that follows. So you would have to give an argument that it follows.
Yeah, but when you say crop deaths, what you're talking about is like the intended versus the unintended. What I'm suggesting is that like one of the things vegans don't want to talk about is like there is a whole lot of intentional crop death, right? Pesticides, insecticides, like these very intentionally remove those sentient creatures from our row crops.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I don't
And
see
what
why
I'm
that's a
suggesting
bad
is
thing.
that, like, well, how do you justify the death and suffering of those sentient creatures over the death and suffering of like cattle or pigs?
Well, there are a few propositions that are true of these creatures, and that proposition would be firstly, many of them are of. In fact, I think it would be safe to say that most of them, we don't have sufficient evidence for them being sentient, like insects. Uh, so second proposition would be that their natural state is one of suffering. So they kill and eat each other alive all the time. They kill and eat each other's babies. Uh, and then the other thing is that they can't be reasoned with, and they're also so small that it's pragmatically very difficult to use non-lethal methods to get them out of the crop field. And of course, the other thing is that it's not clear why not doing that would be a better thing. So, like for instance, a conjunction of all of these four propositions that I just mentioned, a conjunction of that gives me reason to believe that it could actually be a good thing. We could actually be preventing uh, rights violations by spraying them with pesticides.
Let's use the example of like wild hogs versus domestic pigs.
Mm-hmm.
This is perfect. It's basically the same animal. Taxonomically, it is the same animal, except for one animal destroys tens of thousands of acres of crops,
Mm-hmm.
and the other animal is managed as a livestock animal.
Mm-hmm.
You would prefer kill wild hogs to prevent crop death over domesticating pigs and using them as livestock.
Not necessarily.
You got to do one. We have to eat.
No, I mean we could use non-lethal measures to get rid of the hog.
No, you cannot.
What do you mean you cannot? Yeah, what do you mean by we cannot?
You can't.
Well,
Domestic
yeah, what do
or
you mean by
wild
that?
hogs.
Like, so that's an impossibility. Are you saying it's impossible?
Hold on. Are you just unfamiliar with the? Well, hold on. A second ago, you just got done talking about pragmatism. Are you unfamiliar with the fact that there is like an invasive wild hog problem?
I'm sure there is, but I'm sure it's very easy to non-lethally get rid of a hog.
Are you? Are you sure of that?
I mean, you said we can't, right? So you made that claim, so you would have to substantiate it. So under
No,
what
you made the
modality are
claim.
you saying that is
Hold
not?
on a second. Hold on. You made the claim that we can very easily get rid of hogs, wild hogs. With
Oh no, it was just like a counter thing. So you said you said we can't. So I just posed like an alternative thing. Like why? What's the argument that it's not possible? So you said it's we can't, and then I asked you for a justification for that.
You did. You made a claim, but that's fine. I don't know how you would have to fence out the fields, but you'd have to completely fence all of the row crops in like southern Texas,
Mm-hmm.
Florida. Like, it's not pragmatic.
What do you mean by that?
Hogs are very destructive. They dig, they root. It's not pragmatic to defend your row crops from an infestation of invasive wild hogs in a non-lethal manner. So
Yeah. What's the argument for that?
let's go ahead and use. Let's go ahead and use the hypothetical that let's use this as like a thought experiment that I'm right, that you cannot non-lethally remove invasive wild hogs from row crops. Why, in your opinion, would it be morally superior position to kill wild hogs as opposed to domesticating those hogs and using them for livestock?
Yeah, so like even if you assume that we have to kill some wild hogs, right?
Let's assume you have to kill the same amount to protect the crops that you would have to kill to feed people.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't see a difference between both of them then. but I don't think that's the case.
Okay. So you're just like pleading ignorance then?
Yeah, I'm agnostic on the view. Yeah, you could say that.
That's like a comfortable position to be in then. Just plead agnosticism and ignorance on like all of the issues that we typically discuss when we're debating like the pragmatism of a vegan lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things which we don't have information about, and pretending that we have information and pretending to think that we know about it is just going to be less preferable on my epistemic standards than to just plead agnosticism. Like, people think that there is some kind of, like, they feel obligated to take one or the other view, and I just say that I'm not, I don't see why I have to take either view. I could just be agnostic until I am given some kind of an argument or some evidence. Well, it's going to be it's going to be an argument anyway, but yeah, some kind of an inference to suggest that I ought to believe one or the other.
Do you think a fully vegan lifestyle is pragmatic?
What do you mean by a fully vegan lifestyle?
Like a global vegan movement where there is no livestock.
Yeah, but what do you mean by fully vegan?
Meaning like no livestock. Like is like a legislative objective to prevent animal suffering.
I don't see why it's not.
I'm going to send you something else after we get off of this discussion as well. But I think
But
there's
wait,
probably
do you think it's not pragmatically possible?
yeah, I don't think it's pragmatic.
Okay, so yeah.
I think first of all you need like a certain amount of manure to like fertilize row crops. I think you have to have animal agriculture to be able to produce enough like bio waste to then fertilize the fields to then be able to grow the crops. I think the idea of vertical farming is fantastical. I think I think most of veganism exists in like this like utopian worldview that just isn't possible.
Isn't possible under what modality?
I don't think that we can grow enough plant food to feed the entire world without like animal agriculture.
Wait, that's not telling me under which modality.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's not telling me which modality you're referring to when you say it's not possible.
I don't think that we possess the technology to grow food without animal agriculture.
Right now, maybe, yeah. But are you going to hold the same view for maybe 50 years or 100 years later?
I don't know, but my question was not 50 years from now. My question was now.
I mean, even if I grant that today we don't have the technology, I don't see how that entails we ought not go vegan.
I mean, from a utilitarian standpoint, if we legislated veganism as a mandate right now, probably the food systems would collapse.
Well, firstly, I'm not a utilitarian. Secondly, what's the argument for that?
There'd be mass famine and human suffering all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'm not a utilitarian. Secondly, what's the argument for that?
Because we currently grow tens of millions of calories of food in the form of livestock, and if you legally mandated its removal without any kind of an infrastructure in place to substitute those calories with plant-based food, millions of people would die.
That's just rephrasing the claim, right? I'm asking you to substantiate it, not repeat the claim.
You're asking me to substantiate the fact that currently we grow most of our calories from animal agriculture.
No, I'm asking you to substantiate the claim that if we legislate that out of the system, then millions of people will be starving.
because if you don't substitute the food source that you're removing with legislation with a comparable food source, people will starve.
Yeah, that's just repeating the claim, right?
I feel like you go through these little word games just to like kind of derail the conversation when you know damn well what I'm saying.
Well, I didn't ask you clarification. I asked you to substantiate the claim.
You want me to substantiate the claim that if we legislate away animal food products, people would starve.
Yep.
It's kind of obvious, right?
Not to me.
Not to you. We just got done saying that you agree that we don't have the technology to produce the plant-based food to sustain society.
No, well, I didn't grab that.
I think
said
at this point probably we've gone through a point where we're past like good faith conversation, and I think you're going into word games, but that's fine. I mean, is there any other questions you wanted to ask me?
not from my side, but but yeah, I would like you just repeated the claim, right? So I would like you to substantiate the claim.
All right, man. I've had a fun time talking. If there's anything else you wanted to say.
Oh no, I don't have anything else to say.
All right, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, fun talking to you too.
But yeah.